Hey everyone, Cleo here. It is day 13 of Bookmas 2018 and today the prompt is to talk about the authors that were new to me in 2018. Now actually there were quite a couple of authors that were new to me in 2018 and so I won't be going into all of them because for some of them, for example, I already know that I won't go into a second book by them, not necessarily based off of the fact that I didn't like the book, but there are a couple of books that I read, for example, on my US trip that I felt like were very suitable to my US trip, but they were like non-fiction books about it, and the only other time that I will read a book like that will probably be for another US trip. So I won't go into all of them just because for that reason. So when I already know, like, either I don't expect them to really have any other books, or I know that for no particular reason linked to the author, I won't be revisiting a book by them, I've decided to leave them off of the room. I've decided to leave them off of the list. Now, my list still includes, I think, about 10 authors. Now, I do note that I only own like 2 physical copies of these authors, so for the most part I will have to put up a little, like, what do you call that? Well, book covers. I'll be putting little book covers here. Luckily I have a lot of space here now, so that you can know what I'm talking about. Now the first one that I will be mentioning, so I'm always checking to the side now because I have my laptop there to tell me which ones they are, because otherwise I can't remember. So the first one, I actually indeed do not own a physical copy, but I definitely want to get a physical copy because it was a very good book and a author that I will definitely want to get to continue reading a lot of books by, and that is Ian McEwan. And the book I'm talking about is On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan, which I found to be a very beautiful book. I wasn't necessarily always happy with the way he developed his stories. I would have sometimes wanted a story to develop differently, but I could always respect the direction he went in. You know, it's not like sometimes I have the problem with Stephen King that I feel like he screws up the ending or anything like that. In this case I really felt like, I would have gone the other route. So that's like the side note that I can make here, that he makes choices that I wouldn't necessarily want him to make. However, they are explored in an interesting way, and I definitely feel like he has very beautiful prose. His first sentence of the novel really was already one of the best first sentences I've read in a very long time. So I definitely want to read more by him and see whether I really enjoy his style for more of his books, especially, for example, Atonement. I know it was very much of a buzz book at some point, and I saw the adaptation, but because that one didn't really convince me, I didn't really look into the book, but maybe I should, and maybe the book will really, maybe I will really fall in love with the book, and it's just the fact that the adaptation is just not that much to my taste. Second author that I'm going to be mentioning is one that I do own the physical copy to. It is one that I wasn't necessarily super, I wasn't necessarily super in love with either the writing or the story, so I don't know whether I will be revisiting this author or not. There were some very good parts to this novel, so in that sense it might be worth it to give this author a second chance. However, with so many books coming out every year, I don't know whether I will actually do it at some point. But so I am talking about the Man Booker Prize winner for 2018, and that is Milkman by Anna Burns. I discussed this book already a couple of times, for example, in my November wrap-up as well. So if you want more thoughts on that, go to my November wrap-up. Basically, I just thought it was a bit too much of a struggle to get through at times, and that there was not enough of a reward to warrant me recommending this book. And so I will most likely also not be revisiting this author unless there's like a huge hype around one of her books or anything like that at some point. The third author that I'm mentioning, well, since it's here, will also be the other physical copy that I have, and that is the Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. This was one that had been standing on my desk, that had been standing on my shelves for a very long time already. I bought a couple of the vintage red editions a while back, and this was one of them, and I just didn't get around to it for a very long time. Then when our book club needed some recommendations, I put it on there, and we decided to go with this because it had the highest average Goodreads rating out of the books that we nominated. In the end, I was the only one who actually liked the novel, the rest didn't like it. However, all of them also said that it is a book that is easy to go through. I mean, it reads very easily, it's fluently written. It's just that, yeah, you might get the feeling like, what am I reading? What is the story about? Is this story about anything or not? And that is the frustration most of the others had with it. I absolutely loved it. I also loved how, for me at least, it seems to be a lot about the act of writing and the creation that results from writing, and how creation takes on its own life, becomes an entity in the world. And so for me, I really liked it, but none of the others read anything like this into the story, so might be just my personal reading of it. In any case, I do know that a lot of people do like this, but I will say, if you say afterwards, this was a horrible book, why did you recommend this? It is definitely like a you hate it or you love it type of books, I'm expecting. But so yeah, I really like this one, and I know that there is another book by Mikhail Bulgakov that I definitely want to get to, which is A Young Doctor's Notebook, because there is a TV adaptation from that one, and I actually saw that one prior to it, not knowing that this was by the same author. And the TV adaptation in any case is hilarious, also very weird, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading like the book that inspired that adaptation. Okay, so so far for the books that I actually have on my shelf, I mean, Ian McEwan I also don't have on my shelf, but I want to get. The other ones I don't necessarily want to get, but that doesn't mean that they weren't enjoyable. First one I will mention is one that I mentioned yesterday already, and that is America for Beginners by Leah Frankie. So it is a debut novel, and I listened to it on audiobook. It is about a mother who sets out to America after her husband dies to kind of discover whether he was telling the truth when he told her that their son had died, and kind of like a typical travel story in which some lost souls band together and find themselves. I really enjoyed it. I don't necessarily say that it is one of the best books, one of the lowest books. It is kind of average in this sense, but it is it's like an enjoyable average. It's a book that I feel like is a perfect in-between book for when you've really been engrossed in a book and you need a bit of a breather. America for Beginners will be like a nice palate cleanser in that sense. But so yeah, I absolutely enjoyed that one. So the next author that was new to me is maybe a bit of a shocker that this is new to me. She had been on my radar for a super long time. I mean, really. I guess when I first started reading fantasy, these series were already like on my radar in a sense, but I never like to have too many fantasy series going on at once, because then I feel like I won't know as much about where each of these are. So I would often try to like continue in a limited number of series, and have only when like one finishes start a new one, which is why I never started this one, because it just had so many books. And I'm talking about Robin Hobb, and so I finally started, in my case that is then the Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which I read this year, right after starting my booktube channel, because I felt like I wanted to get more back into fantasy, which is definitely also what I will be continuing into 2019. I want to make it a return to fantasy, because fantasy has really been like the genre that kept me reading, that started me reading, and I really want to be able to continue with more fantasy, because I feel like I haven't been reading a lot of fantasy. And even though when I check like the end of the year lists of what I've read, there's still quite a bit of fantasy on there, I still feel like I haven't had a lot of fantasy in my year. So it used to be like a 50% of all I read was fantasy, even more, and now it's definitely not there anymore. And I just kind of feel like that is a shame, because yeah, it really is a genre that can push me to read way more than I'm currently reading. But so I really enjoyed Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I was not necessarily happy with the pacing at the end of the book, but throughout I really liked it, so I'm very interested to see if this pacing problem that I had with the ending of the first novel was just kind of a one-time deal, or whether I will always feel like she just rushes the completion of a novel or not. But so I'm definitely expecting to continue this series, hopefully sooner rather than later, because yeah, now I still know what happens. So this is the problem with fantasy series going on at once. It's but yeah, I will definitely try to be able to go into fantasy more this year. More, even though that might mean that I have to have multiple fantasies going on at once. Maybe I just need to write like a review of what happens in the books before going on to another book. But in any case, so I really enjoyed Robin Hobb. I've always known that a lot of people really enjoyed her books, so I really hope to be able to at least finish like the first trilogy sometime soon, 2019, I don't know. And then we are on to the 6th author that was new to me this year. I mean, as I said, there were more than 10 authors that are new to me, but the 6th one that I will be mentioning, and that is Andrew Sean Greer and his book Less, which I also listened to on audiobook. And yeah, for me it's very much a bit like America for Beginners by Leah Frankie. But so in Less we follow our protagonist, who is a writer. Now he was in a relationship with an older writer who was very famous, and he's constantly being asked now for events to talk about his relationship with that writer, because that writer is very ill now and on his deathbed. And he doesn't really want to capitalize on this, but when his young ex-lover is about to get married, he decides to kind of evade going to the wedding by accepting a lot of these literary invitations. And so we follow him around the world going on all of these events, and yeah, the adventures that ensue from them, or the misconceptions that ensue from them, and things like that. I really enjoyed this. I very much like books like that, books that include a certain travel element to it, just like America for Beginners. And so the different settings is also something that I very much enjoy reading about. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. I would also say the audiobook was definitely an okay route to go with it. But for me this was also more of a like in-between book. I guess it's based off of the genre maybe. And then the 8th author that I've been introduced, I don't think my counting is correct anymore, but okay, the next author that I was introduced to was Angie Thomas and her The Hate You Give, which I also listened to on audiobook. I got a lot of these new authors based off of like audiobooks apparently. But so yeah, The Hate You Give, it's been talked about a lot since it came out, and I won't be adding anything new to this. I really loved it. I'm really looking forward to the new book that Angie Thomas is bringing out, but also kind of reluctantly, because I'm kind of anxious about whether she will be able to live up to the expectations. Yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed the story. Thought it was very important, but also it's discussing like a super important theme, a super heavy theme, but still it manages to stay light in a lot of parts as well, which I thought was absolutely remarkably done. So I'm really looking forward to her next novel on the come up, which is coming out in 2019. And then we are on to yeah, a little bit more of a side note here. Emily R. King. I read her, what is it, The 100th Queen or something like that, and then the sequel, The Fire Queen. So this is a YA fantasy series, so I read The 100th Queen and I immediately read The Fire Queen. However, after The Fire Queen I no longer had an interest in reading the 3rd book in the series. So I don't know, I'll probably get to it eventually, but I already remember almost nothing about what it is about. I think our protagonist, whose name I've already totally forgotten, gets recruited to be like the 100th queen of the king, but she's been struggling with like illness her entire life, but then it turns out that her illness might have been a disguise for something else. Ooh, intrigue. But so yeah, I liked the first novel. I liked I mean, it didn't blow my mind or anything, but I liked it and I was intrigued by it. But then after the second one, it just kind of started to bore me. Then the second to last author I will be mentioning is Celeste Ng. I listened to her Little Fires Everywhere, and I really loved it. I loved her pacing, her style. the everydayness of the story, but yeah, still how she manages to keep that everyday story very interesting and those characters so relatable. Yeah, I really enjoyed my listen to Celeste Ng's Little Fires Everywhere, and I heard that what is it? Everything I Never Told You, I think, is the title of your other book. Is definitely also worth it. So I will definitely probably give that a go. And then the final one that I'll be mentioning is Laura Esquivel, which is a Latin American author, and I just thought her writing was so gorgeous. So I read Como Agua para Chocolate by her, and it's a book that mixes like recipes with a story, but like the recipes are also like so romanticized and things like that, but the language was just absolutely gorgeous in her books. And so I definitely want to check out whether she's read anything, whether she has written anything else, and if so, give those a go, because yeah, it was just such a beautiful prose. But so yeah, I'll definitely hope to be exploring some more authors in 2019. I will probably also be filming at some point, but I don't know when that'll be, a sort of video in which I mention the 10 authors that I still really want to get to at some point, and then maybe also after 3 years I can look back on this and see whether I got to them or not. But there are definitely some out there that have been on my radar for a while that I haven't gotten to, so I will try to finalize that list in a video sometime in the future. But so yeah, see you tomorrow for day 14 of Bookmas, when it is, when I mention my top audiobooks of 2018. Spoiler, they have been mentioned in this video, but okay, see you tomorrow.